It seems like every week someone is now coming back out with a diluted hybrid schedule, trending more towards 4-5 days in.
I think what it'll go back to is how it was before, where if you wanted to get the promotion, you kind of had to be in an office and get the face time with the senior leadership. Those that are already happy where they are in their career, they can work remotely, be effective, but they're just not going to have as many options and opportunities for those promotions that others may.
It's important to address how AI is affecting the way companies source and evaluate talent. 20, 30-year career veterans, right, are having to upskill themselves. What advice would you have for candidates in this day and age, as well as hiring teams or hiring managers?
So I think that
how should candidates be navigating the world of remote work and return to office? What about the supply and demand of a workforce surrounded by technological advancements? In my conversation with Chris Berta, executive recruiter and proud critical thinker, we discuss how these topics create opportunities for both employers and candidates, and the best way to stand out in an ever-changing world of skills and competency requirements. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
I appreciate it, Jesse. Good to see you as well.
So, I want to get straight to this because you are somebody who also comes from the recruitment industry. So you have a 10,000-foot view, but also a ground-level view of the labor market. And I want to get your take on what you're seeing more generally. And then I have a question for you specifically regarding the remote work and return to office stuff as well. So what's your perspective on the labor market and the recruitment market at the moment?
It's unsettled is probably the best way to say it, because on one hand, you have cuts. Microsoft's made 15,000 cuts this past year. Amazon just made some cuts. We focus in the technology space, so that's my sphere of and view. At one side, you have these cuts happening, but then you have startups and other companies that are hiring. And I was talking to another recruiter yesterday, and she's slammed and she's overwhelmed, right, with the amount of recs that she is trying to handle. So it's a very unsettled market. And I think part of it is, and we were going to talk about this a little bit more, is just as we move into AI, people are trying to solve for that, but don't really know what that ultimate goal is going to be. And right. So it's a fascinating time as we have a number of candidates that are pinging us and saying, hey, I'm open to a new opportunity. And then we have a number of roles that are opening up as well. Unfortunately, they're not the exact fits. So you're just trying to, figure out who's going to fit, which puzzle piece is going to fit best.
Would you say it's more of a client-driven or candidate-driven market at the moment, at least in your field?
It really depends on the focus of the company. So even within technology, one of my clients is a clean tech company, and they focus on the power systems of really around AI, and they're blowing up. I mean, they're just exploding. A lot of startups are getting amount of funding, and so they're expanding as well. And so their leadership and executive teams are growing. And so I would say it is more of there are more roles open than perhaps before. But again, some of these bigger companies are making cuts too. So I would say that there's leverage kind of on both sides. Just depends on how skilled or how unique your skills are and how much are they in demand. Because I've had some candidates that are in high demand, so they end up being able to require a decent comp package and some where they have the leverage. In other situations, we've had a ton of candidates for these different roles, and the client has the leverage. So it really is. I'm being kind of wishy-washy in my response, but it really depends on the segment, and the function itself determines who has the leverage.
I agree. I think it's hard to paint anything, as big as that with a single brush stroke, And I would say for us, specifically in financial services, it's the same. We like to use a phrase, right, where it's a copycat league, I think that comes from some in sports, right, where somebody decides that this position is important, so everyone goes and tries to find that type of athlete or player. Everyone decides that this analytical tool is important, so every team wants to do that. The same thing exists here, right? So we're seeing, especially in technology fields within financial services, right? Everything is AI and machine learning and data science based still. The clients are a little bit more active than they have been the last couple of years. I would say, some of our earlier episodes from this year, we talked about what is the state of the 2025 recruitment market, right? And the pendulum swing of COVID to post-COVID to the last couple of years, it's just all been living in extremes, right? And I think this year there's been of an element of return to normalcy, that cyclicality of recruitment, if you will. So we're seeing, clients are generating a few more recs than we have in the past, and it's not uncommon, that certain hedge funds will be looking for a certain skill, and then other hedge funds will look for that skill.
Right.
Yeah. Copycat league, and the banks operate in the same way. But I think the activity is greater, and as you say, especially when it comes to those who are on the emerging technology front and dealing with those skill sets, those candidates tend to have more leverage. And then on the banks, those who are high revenue generators and things like that tend to create their leverage. So that all makes sense. I want to ask you specifically, in your opinion, the impact to both companies and employees in a return to office and remote world, right? I know this is something that we've previously spoken about, but also it seems like every week someone is now coming back out with a kind of walked back or diluted hybrid schedule. Everything is trending more towards 4-5 days in. So what are you seeing with regards to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, we've been wrestling with this since COVID, right? And so companies have been going through this, trying to figure out what's going to be best for them. Starbucks just announced that they're requiring their corporate employees to come back 4 days a week. Amazon is 5 days a week. And one of my clients, Bloom Energy, wants to find people that can be in their San Jose office, and they're in the energy space. And so there just isn't a hotbed of talent, a deep pool of talent of energy people in San Jose. And so that's the parameters that we're dealing with of trying to find the right candidate with those skill sets in those markets, or trying to relocate people into those markets. So you just have a smaller pool of talent to pull from. So, as an employee, or employer, you're going to be confined by that requirement or that constraint of the talent within that market. As an employee, you're also, if you are not wanting to move, there's just going to be a smaller pool of companies that you can work for that have that or that technology or business that you're attracted to. Another client of mine's 100% remote, and it's DuckDuckGo. And so then the challenge for us there is we can look worldwide for candidates. And so now you have to go through that many more profiles to find that ideal fit. So each one has its constraints and challenges. You just have to figure out what's going to be best for you as a company. And we did a paper about this a while back where we analyzed and interviewed enough people that so not only is it the function and the business, but it's also the stage of an employee's career. So an early stage person coming out of college, they probably don't want to be doing Zoom calls in an apartment with 3 other roommates. So they want to go into an office, and it's also a place where they can gain their mentorship. They can
experience it for the first time. Exactly.
They can learn how to do business. Quite frankly, that's where they're going to hone their craft. Mid-career people, they probably have a home office. They have kids. So they like that flexibility of being able to go into an office or work from home, wherever it may be. And they're probably their managerial responsibility is a direct functional team. And so they can be successful in that environment working remotely. And then when you get into senior exec, their success really is dependent upon their ability to build relationships cross-functionally. And so that's going to happen in an office environment. So they don't mind going back to an office. So not only is it the functional requirements of a role, but it's also the stage of a career of an employee as well that need to be taken into account. And so, at the theme or the point of that paper was, don't make mandate across the company as a whole. Let the teams decide individually what's going to be best for them based on the makeup and the function of that team, and then where they are in their careers. And so that's where I think there needs to be that flexibility built into these requirements And then also reevaluate them over time as well to make sure that they're working for the company, for the employees.
So many good points there, and I think a couple takeaways for me. First of all, that point that you just made, right? That this is it's a living, breathing initiative almost, right? Obviously, COVID, it wasn't. It was stagnant, and it was 5 days in because that's what companies did, and then COVID happened, and now we're in a world of options between full time, fully remote, hybrid, what have you. And I think I'm based in New York, right? And we have clients who are in New York, employ thousands of people in New York with huge talent pools, or maybe they have offices in Texas or Florida, other huge talent pools, London, right? And CEOs of these major banks and other companies can say, if you don't want to come in, then like that's fine with me, but you don't have a place here, because they can just go find someone that's right there. I think your San Jose example is a really good example of that for those companies that need to actually really evaluate this, right? And it isn't hard and fast immediately or long term. Like we might have to review, and it's not just entirely up to the employee opinion, but it might be another view in 2 more years. Another day might come off, or they might add another day, or it might stay. You're absolutely right that it's so important and imperative for companies to evaluate like what is best for their particular model. And it again, you can't just singular broad stroke evaluate everything.
Or everyone. And then I think what it'll go back to is how it was before, where if you wanted to get the promotion, you kind of had to be in an office and get the face time with the
Yes.
senior leadership.
Yes.
And so we're going to end up seeing that, I think, come through kind of organically, where those that are clamoring to rise the company ladder are going to be in an office or around where they can build those internal relationships. Those that are already happy in their state, where they are in their career, have other priorities, they can work remotely, be effective, but they're just not going to have the ability, as many options and opportunities for those promotions that others may.
In my personal opinion, right, we don't like to opine too much on this podcast, but in my personal opinion, I think that's totally fair, right? Like if you want to be comfortable in a remote setting and that's what works best for your life, that's fine, no problem, right?
Exactly.
But those who want to be high achievers and seek promotions and seek to gain influence, the office is the best place to do it. So
Exactly.
each organization is unique. Each candidate is unique. And, I think if we're speaking to the candidates who might be listening to this conversation, right, I think they've lost a little bit of the leverage with regards to, all right, well, I want to have my cake and eat it too. I want to work for JP Morgan because I want to work at one of the leading banks in the world, but I am based in New Hampshire and I'd like to just stay in New Hampshire. Okay, well, you can either stay in New Hampshire. I'm picking New Hampshire because that's where I'm from. You can either stay in New Hampshire or you can move to one of JP Morgan's locations, right? You can be physically located in Columbus and work at JP Morgan or another company like that, but you can't say you want to work for Goldman Sachs and stay in Columbus. Like as a candidate, you just have to come to grips with those being the scenarios.
And I think there's going to be kind of an attraction. There's going to be some people that want that 100% remote role and company, and so they'll be attracted to those types of companies. There's going to be others that want to be in an office, and so they know that so it's almost going to be self-defining on which side of that continuum you go to based on where you are in your stage of career and the kind of future you want to have in that industry.
Exactly. So let's pivot the conversation to you kind of teased it a little bit. We're not going to go full AI in this conversation, but I think it's important to address, right, how AI is affecting the way companies source and evaluate talent, the way employees use the technology. Just say a little bit about that hiring paces as a result of AI augmentation, right? Is there anybody who's at risk? Are there skill sets or for employees or for candidates who might be at risk? Tell me your thoughts on a recruiting world with artificial intelligence taking more center stage.
Yeah, like I said, we're in technology, and so we're wrestling around with this and talking to companies about this many times a day. Because again, the promise of AI is that it's going to build efficiencies and it's going to make companies much more effective. I mean, there's been the threat of a five-person company becoming $1 trillion valuation entity, and so that's the promise that's out there, and so boards and execs hear that, and so they're trying to put the pressure on companies or on the employees to recognize that and feel that out. I think the people that are going to be most at risk are those that are just in their day-to-day business, heads down, figuring out and delivering on their objectives, but without having with blinders on and being really myopic. They're not seeing where the opportunities to employ AI would be within their daily tasks. And then they're
Hmm.
also not evaluating where AI could impact not only their function as a whole, but also the company and the industry. And so I think we all need to be creative and try to anticipate where, it's kind of like skating to where the puck is going. We all need
Sure.
to figure out where this is all heading because we're all in this kind of walking through a dark forest without any a flashlight right now. And so, we'll cast the light over there, we'll cast the light over, and you'll start seeing different pieces. But I think in the long run, the function, well, I should say in the long run, in the short run, what we're seeing is some of the functions that are getting affected are really more like communication roles. So, like writers or copywriters, translators, people that are, those are the ones that are getting impacted right now. And Business Insider had an article the other day that just listed out all the affected functions from AI, and those were really the top ones right there. The bottom ones that weren't affected were like pipe layers and it's more manual blue collar work.
Physical labor. Yep.
Yeah. And so we're all trying to figure this out. And I think the people that are going to be most negatively affected are those that are myopic and not really leveraging the tools and trying to explore and be creative about it. The people that are going to be the most positively affected are those that can anticipate and look around the corner and say, hey, you know what? This is where this tool is really going to be beneficial. I should be either building an LLM or doing something that's going to be, an agent that's going to be appropriate for that solution. So we're just going to, like I said, in an unsettled employment market, but we're also in an unsettled technology status as well, as you have multiple types of pressures. And really, it's asking the questions and being just curious about what is going to be, where it's going to all end up. And we just don't know.
A previous guest from not too long ago, actually, the episode was about the labor market just as a whole, right? And his view and the incorporation just generally on how employees of all ages, right? I think that's kind of the point that you're alluding to here,
Mhm.
right? You can't just say, "Oh, well, I'm old school," right? I proceed. I don't use that stuff. I proceed. This is my skill set. He was saying peers of his and 20, 30-year career veterans, right, are having to upskill themselves the same way college students and high school students are upskilling themselves for the long term of their career, right? So everybody needs to just augment themselves and kind of get with the times for a lack of sensitivity around the way that whole thing is approached. What about the supply and demand element of this, just with regards to what we think around job requirements as a result of an ever-changing technological world or an augmented world? Do you foresee talent supply and demand changes or talent requirement supply and demand changes? What do you think?
So I think that a lot of the hard, so if I'm looking like long term, in the future, I think a lot of the hard technology skills, so coding, a lot of those functions are probably going to be done by AI. And so what I think companies are going to need to figure out is how to evaluate soft skills better because it's going to be the curiosity. It's going to be the how do you create the vision and then communicate that vision to a company as a leader that's going to be most impactful because a lot of the strategy development and the writing of a copy for marketing, that's all going
Yeah.
to be done by AI. but it's
Yes.
putting this all together into a story that then can get communicated effectively to the team, to the market, to analysts, investors. So, how do you do that? And those are really the soft skills. Like I said, the hard skills are going to be done in large part by technology. And it's an interesting. So the other stat that is fascinating is that in the last couple of years, we've seen a ton of CEO turnover, and so we're on pace
Okay.
to also have another year of record-breaking CEO turnover. And a large part, in my mind, is because they were good in their current form, but in the future, as they need to bring all
Adaptability.
these different groups together and communicate a vision, adapt to these new environments, they the board didn't feel like they had the skills, or the CEO didn't feel like they had the skills themselves, and said they stepped away. So again, it's the soft skills. It's bringing teams together. It's getting buy-in from multiple parts of an organization, and then getting them to rally around a common objective and vision that is going to be important. And that, you can take that from a CEO, but you can take it down to a more individual a manager who's trying to get that for a team to
Yep.
understand why they are doing what they're doing. So it's, again, answering the question why in all these different areas.
It's really interesting because even the last, the last few segments of the podcast that we've had, right? One of, as I just mentioned, the labor market. Another was around using some bureaucracy kind of as red tape as a guideline rather than like the line. And AI is a really good example of that. And the conversation that we're having right now is a really good example of that, as it allows people to think a bit more freely and develop themselves rather than just follow what seems, has always been thought to be the singular path. Kind of use it a little bit as bumpers, right? And it's going to force people to be creative, think, and apply some more critical thinking a little bit more. So
Yeah, I've had this conversation with people. One of my, both my sons are in college right now, and so I've been thinking about what is the discipline that they should be focusing on. And in some cases, I'm thinking philosophy or how to think is going to be important, because it's not going to be like I said,
I love that answer.
the hard skills of technology, or specific accounting functions. It's going to be, how do you think, so that you can question correctly what is why we're doing things, how we're doing things. And that is going to be more important, I think, moving forward, because answers are going to be accessible across everything. So really the importance is the right questions to be asked.
I love that answer. And we could probably have a total pivot of this conversation and then talk for the next 2 hours about critical thinking and a liberal arts education. But that's for a later time. But you're absolutely right. I think the like reflex answer is computer science. But is it right? Like there's only there's a finite opportunity in computer science. And look, literally, I make my money, and we make our money here at Selby Jennings on placing so many candidates with hard science degrees, and there will always be a need for that. But especially, in this day and age, I think a need for critical thinking is really important, and that skill never goes out of style.
And maybe it's a combination, right? You have a framework of how those hard skills are done, but then you end up having that layer on of the critical thinking of the more esoteric concepts that you need to have as to why you're doing things, and then how you can, and then what questions need to be asked about different applications of that technology.
So I want to wrap up with one final question. We've kind of alluded to it, right? Obviously, without me specifically asking for your advice to listeners, we've kind of addressed it, and you've kind of provided it. But specifically, I can give you the floor. In addition to anything we've already talked about, what advice would you have for candidates in this day and age, at any skill level, at any experience level, as well as hiring teams or hiring managers at this day and age?
Go back to being curious. Having that curiosity, because what is happening now is not going to be the way it's going to be done in the future. And so we're in an accelerated evolution stage, which means that changes are going to happen quickly. And so being open to where that's going to take you, asking the right questions, making sure that you are abreast of what is happening across not only your specific function, but also the company and the industry as a whole. So it's all of those pieces and there's so much. The problem is there's so much information, and we only have 24 hours in a day to. So now it's a matter of synthesizing that correctly, and again, going back to asking the right questions so that you can find the information that's going to be relevant. So that can be applicable to a first year person coming out of college. It could be a exec that's looking to move into a new company, and then going back to the hiring people is finding those people that have that curiosity that are going to be able to help your company evolve into the new dynamics that are going to happen. And one of the things that some of my clients are looking for are people that have that AI forward thinking in their product development experience already. I mean, Gen AI has really only been around since 23, right? It was
Yep.
22, 23. So we're 2 years into this. So you think about this is the initial stages of it all. And so we're just, kind of peeling away the onion right now. We're just at the top layer. So this is just going to continue to get more and more robust, more and more impactful, and permeate our lives that much more. And the whole concept of AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is when the AI tools start making decisions based on other inputs, you're going to end up seeing that accelerate where the industry, where technology, where your own careers are going to go because these decisions are going to be made in large part for you. You just need to be, again, asking the right questions to make sure that you're staying on top of what's happening. And some advice that I just tell people is to try to build your own personal expertise, your own personal brand, so that regardless of where these technologies take us, you will have a recognized expertise in a specific area so that people can call on you. And then that can evolve over time as well. And you see more and more people, podcasts like this, webinars
Yeah, yeah.
being out there and, writing white papers, writing content so that they can be a part of this dialogue and then can get called on by uh, employers when they need to have that kind of thinking in their organization.
I first of all, I love the answer of being curious because it's so broad yet so helpful, right? Be just be interested in learning, right? Just be interested. And for candidates, right, if we're advising to be curious in an interview process, right?
Right.
Don't just think about the technical aspect of, can I answer this question the way I think they want to be answered? Ask questions back, right? And in the role you're in, be curious. Be curious what the career potential looks like for you. Be curious about what more you can be doing in your role, how you can continue to develop and advance yourself. There's just so many ways to interpret curiosity. And as I said, if we go down that rabbit hole of philosophy and just general curiosity, we'll be here a very long time. So I do appreciate you bringing that up. One of my favorite topics. But we'll wrap up most of the conversation there and finish up with this little segment that I have done previously. We call it underhyped or overhyped. So in your mind, employees and candidates should be concerned about reduction in the workforce as a result of technology. I know we've talked about that a little bit today. Is that an underhyped or overhyped topic?
I think it's underhyped. When you say reduction, I think it's reduction in the short run, but I think in the long run there will be other roles that will be created that we just can't picture right now. But in the short run, for sure. I mean, we're already seeing, like we're talking about, 15,000 people got cut by Microsoft. So you end up having these large organizations that are sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars making cuts, not because they have to, but because they want to knock out layers of management within their company.
Citibank has done it, right? They just went from
Citibank. Yeah,
15 down to 5 or 6 layers, something like that.
yeah. And so those are the immediate. But then as as they're making these cuts, they're also telling their employees, "Hey, get well versed on artificial intelligence. Start using that in your daily routines." In large part because they want to see what other functions can be eliminated. Right now, they can't eliminate wholesale different roles, but it's taking up. I mean, one of my clients he made a comment that 30% of their code is done through artificial intelligence, through Gen AI. So, you know, that can start taking over more and more functions as this becomes more trusted, more secure, all those pieces. And so then you'll see, like we were talking about, translators, analysts, copywriters, those roles will probably be eliminated. But then there's going to be other functions that will be needed in the future that we just can't picture right now. And that's, I think, that's why I think it's underhyped right now. And people companies are afraid to say, "Hey, we're eliminating these roles due to AI." I think you're going to start seeing more and more companies state that and then hire in other areas of the company that will be more strategic for the long run. I mean, Spotify CEO said, "Hey, don't open a job rec until you've tried AI to fill that
Yeah.
functional requirement." So, you have those kind of examples populating here and there. I think you'll see more and more of that happen in the future.
It's so interesting because, there's AI that's eliminating certain roles, right? And you say 30% of code, right? That's some coders right there. Yet those same companies are paying 800K, a million, $1.2 million for the people who are going to be like the principal engineers of the AI systems, right? So the ones who can master it and teach the rest of the organization to use it the most efficient way is like the highest paying job.
Exactly.
Yet it's also taking others, at a more basic level. So it's just a really interesting way to look at
I
it.
just hope we don't get to a situation like where you have actors, where you have the actors making millions of dollars, but then you have all the poor actors that are working as waiters, or basketball. You have basketball teams that have hundreds of millions of dollars on their payroll, but yet most people are playing in a rec league. I hope we don't get so uh, extreme that you have the haves and have-nots, because then
Right.
that just is going to disrupt you know society, I think, in general. That's a much bigger philosophical debate. But to your point, though, Facebook's on this huge hiring frenzy and dropping, tens, hundreds of
Millions,
millions of
hundreds of
dollars.
millions, the
It's yeah,
$200 million hire.
yeah. I mean that's obscene when they're also making cuts to the guy that's making 150, 200K. You're like, yeah, that's unfortunate.
Totally agree. Right. So let's close out with a couple lighter questions. Tell me about some books that you read recently, or a book that has resonated with you, something that you've enjoyed reading over time, and a podcast other than Searching Smarter, of course. If you're a podcast guy, what are some podcasts that you like?
I always go back to Good to Great. I read that, what was that, 15 years ago, and then I've just read it again just because I wanted to see, how does that apply now in some of that thinking. And so, and that goes back to the creativity piece. I like that area of business application. Scott Kelly, the astronaut, I read his biography was interesting. I like biographies just because you end up seeing the inside of somebody.
Yep.
And so, the head of Disney, read his recently. Podcast, Scott Galloway. He has an edge to him, and he paints a realistic picture, I think,
Hmm.
but he does it in a way that is entertaining and draws analogies that you wouldn't normally see and are kind of out there. So I always find his podcasts, his newsletters fascinating because he takes on current events, he takes on situations in business, and just is really entertaining in his really sharp edged way of describing life.
I'm probably going to have to give that one a listen. That sounds like a perspective that, if I am being curious, I would be interested just to hear.
Yeah, I think you would enjoy it. He's opposite of me. He is a glass half empty kind of guy. But I appreciate his intelligence of drawing analogies where I wouldn't recognize.
Okay. I'm open on perspective. I'm open to being curious. And with that, we've come full circle. So we'll close it there. Chris Berta, thank you so much for your time and insights and perspective on an industry that we both share. So always great to share some similar viewpoints from varying perspectives. So thanks for being here.
I appreciate it, Jesse. It's been a pleasure. This has been fun.
That's all for today's episode of Searching Smarter. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, keep searching smarter.